A week before my greedy son-in-law's lavish birthday party in Dallas, I withdrew every last dollar from our joint accounts. My daughter had boasted about paying for his dream Ford F-150 Platinum with my hard-earned money, clueless that I'd cut them off. When she discovered the truth, their betrayal faced devastating consequences they never saw coming. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. The neighbor's dog was barking at something in the dark when my phone lit up at 6:15 on a Tuesday morning. Nicole. Before I even touched the screen, I knew the call was going to cost me something. It always did lately, just not usually this much. My name is Raymond Castillo, 66 years old. Oak Cliff, Dallas, the part of town that was working class before working class became trendy. I spent 30 years building other people's houses and commercial spaces across North Texas, ran my own contracting outfit, swung a hammer on job sites from Garland to Fort Worth, and sold the whole operation 2 years ago for $310,000. Now I collect rent from 2 duplexes over in Garland, $3,200 a month between them, and let Social Security cover the coffee and the electric bill. I drive a 2018 Chevy Silverado with 94,000 miles on it, and I'm fine with that. I don't need much. Never did. I let the call go to voicemail, poured a second cup of black coffee, and sat back down on the porch. The oak in the front yard was throwing shade across the fence. The same fence Nicole and I repainted together the summer she was 12, a Saturday that smelled like cedar and her cheap strawberry lip gloss. She kept missing spots, and I kept pretending not to notice. We argued about the color for 45 minutes. She wanted white. I wanted white. The argument was just an excuse to spend the afternoon together. That was Nicole then, the version I raised. I called her back. She answered on the first ring, voice bouncing like she'd already had 3 cups of coffee and a full spin class. She was planning a party for Trent, her husband of 4 years, my son-in-law, a man who managed a logistics team in Plano and treated every social gathering like a career move. The party was set for the 19th. The Statler, downtown Dallas. One of those renovated hotels with a rooftop and a valet and a catering menu priced to remind you what tax bracket you're not in. 40 guests, Trent's work friends mostly. The kind of crowd where everyone's wearing something that costs more than it looks. It's going to be incredible, she said. I've been planning it for weeks. Sounds expensive, I said. Some of the costs are coming from the joint account. Just for the party logistics, catering, the venue deposit, decor. It's fine, Dad. Don't worry about it. How much? Not a lot. I'll send you a breakdown later. She didn't send a breakdown. She never sent a breakdown. I went inside after the call and opened the Chase app on my phone. The joint savings account, the one I'd opened 5 years ago with $94,000 from the business sale. The cushion I told her was for emergencies, not a personal spending line. Showed a current balance of $87,600, which meant $6,400 had already moved without a word to me. Transaction notes said things like vendor deposit, event logistics, catering partial. Reasonable-sounding labels, the kind you use when you don't want someone asking follow-up questions. But that wasn't what stopped me cold. At the bottom of the recent activity list, there was a linked document, an invoice. Dallas Ford dealership, dated 10 days prior. Pre-order confirmation for a 2025 Ford F-150 Platinum. Trent's dream truck. I'd heard about it at every family dinner for 2 years. Black exterior, loaded interior, the premium package with the ventilated seats and the 14-inch screen. Balance due on delivery, $72,400. Delivery date, the 19th. The night of the party. The party was the reveal. Nicole was going to hand Trent the keys in front of 40 people, with my money, without asking me, without telling me, without a single conversation that began with the words, "Dad, I was thinking." I set the phone down on the kitchen table and looked out the window at the backyard. There's a half-finished oak chair in my garage that I've been working on for 3 weeks. Mortise and tenon joints, no hardware, the way furniture used to be made. Patient work, the kind that punishes you if you rush it. I reckon it's time, I thought, and went to get my keys. I sat in the Silverado in the driveway, picked up the phone, not to call Nicole. The screen showed Chase Bank, Jefferson Boulevard. The branch on Jefferson opens at 9. I was in the parking lot at 8:52, watching the morning commute crawl past, thinking about how I got here. 5 years ago I opened that joint account because Nicole asked me to. She said it made her feel safer, knowing there was something set aside if things got hard. Trent had been in the picture for about 2 years by then. They were living in Plano, nice suburb, the kind of life that photographs well. I didn't ask too many questions. I was glad she was happy. I put in $94,000 and told her plainly, this is a safety net. We both agree before anything comes out. She said yes. I believed her. What I didn't consider was when the yes stopped meaning anything. I remembered Trent at their rehearsal dinner. He gave a toast that ran 8 minutes and mentioned himself 14 times. I counted. Nicole laughed at every line. Her eyes lit up the way they'd get when I used to take her to Rangers games. Watching the field, like something extraordinary might happen any moment. She looked at him exactly like that. I filed it away as love and left it alone. The requests started about a year into the marriage. Their AC unit went out in August. 104 degrees for 2 straight weeks. Trent called, asked if I could spot them $3,800. I wrote the check the same day. Then, there was a transmission on Nicole's car. Then, a refinance gap. Then something described as a short-term cash flow thing, with a number I'd rather not revisit. Each time it was framed as temporary. Each time Trent was the one calling. Each time Nicole stayed quiet in the background. I'm not slow. I just loved my daughter. The bank opened. I went inside. The branch manager was a young guy named Kevin. Clean haircut, the posture of someone trained to project helpfulness. He asked how he could help. I put my passport, my card, and a folded document on the counter. I want to close the joint savings account and transfer the balance to my personal account. Kevin pulled up the records, shifted slightly. Mr. Castillo, this account has a secondary authorized user. We'd typically need... Page 3, I said. Section 7. He read it. The original account agreement from 2020. Primary account holder, Raymond Castillo. Unilateral closure rights, primary holder only. Nicole had been added as an authorized user, not a co-owner, not a joint title holder. A distinction I'd read carefully and never mentioned to her. Not out of suspicion, out of habit. A contractor reads his contracts. Kevin looked up. How would you like the funds transferred? The full $87,600 moved to my personal account in 11 minutes. I walked out onto Jefferson into 97-degree heat with the confirmation slip in my hand. She'd taken $6,400 without asking. She'd arranged a $72,400 truck purchase without asking. At some point she'd stopped asking altogether, and I'd either missed it or renamed it Patience. The truck wasn't the real problem. The truck was just the number on the invoice. The problem was what it said about how she saw the account. How she saw me. Something to be managed quietly, from a distance, without the inconvenience of a conversation. I taught her to drive in a Kroger parking lot on a Sunday morning. She stalled the engine 4 times and laughed every single time. I already had an appointment, made the night before, the moment I'd seen the Ford invoice, with a family attorney named Denise Fowler. Office on Ross Avenue, Suite 504. State Bar Referral. 10 a.m. I pulled onto Jefferson heading north. No call to Nicole, nothing to say that wouldn't just put her on alert before I knew exactly what I was protecting myself from. 30 years on job sites taught me one thing. You don't start swinging a hammer until you know which walls are load-bearing. My phone buzzed. Nicole, I looked at the screen and let it ring. Bless her heart, I thought. She doesn't know yet. 2 blocks from the attorney's office, the phone buzzed again. Unknown number, Plano, Texas area code. I picked up on the second ring. The call came from a Plano number I didn't recognize. I answered it on the second ring. The voice on the other end was polished, practiced, the kind of friendly that comes from a sales floor. His name was Justin, from Dallas Ford dealership. He explained that Mrs. Wallace had listed me as a backup contact on the purchase file for a 2025 F-150 Platinum, and he was calling to confirm the final transaction scheduled for the 19th. His tone was bright, expectant, the voice of a man who fully expected to move a $72,400 truck by end of day and get his commission. "There won't be any transaction," I said. "The account's been closed." A pause. "I'm sorry?" "The joint account that was supposed to fund the purchase, it's closed. Whatever Nicole told you, the funds aren't there." Another pause, longer. "Mr. Castillo, should I reach out to Mrs. Wallace to—" "That's between you and her," I said, and ended the call. I sat in the Silverado outside of Denise Fowler's office on Ross Avenue for a minute before driving home. The afternoon heat was coming off the asphalt in waves. I thought about Justin at the dealership, probably already dialing Nicole, and Nicole getting that call, and the 3 seconds of silence before she understood what it meant for her grand reveal. All hat, no cattle. And that was Trent in a single sentence. The truck, the Statler, the 40 guests. A whole production built around a man whose main talent was standing in the right place when someone else's money came through. The next morning, Nicole called twice before 9. I was in the garage, sanding the seat rails of the oak chair. Fine grit work, the kind that requires patience and attention. I let both calls go. On the third try, late that morning, I picked up. She launched in immediately. The party was coming together beautifully. The Statler had confirmed the rooftop space. The catering menu was set. And Trent, she lowered her voice like she was telling me a secret, had no idea. The truck was going to be the moment of the night. She'd worked out the whole thing. The dealership manager would drive it to the side entrance at 9. She'd hand Trent a card with the key inside. Everyone would go downstairs together. 40 people watching. A video for Instagram. I listened to all of it without saying a word, until she stopped for breath. "You already confirmed the purchase with the dealer?" I asked. "Almost. The final payment process is the day of the party. It's going to be so good, Dad." She kept talking. Something about the interior package, the leather color, ventilated seats. I held the phone and watched a mockingbird land on the fence post outside the garage window. Nicole described seat stitching for approximately 90 seconds. "I'll see you at the party," I said. "You're coming? Trent will be so happy." I bet he would. After I hung up, I sat at the workbench and thought about what she'd said in the middle of all of it, almost in passing. "Trent doesn't even know where the money's coming from." She'd said it with a little laugh, like it was clever. That sentence was going to matter. I was sure of it. I pulled out my phone and opened the recording app. Standard feature, and in Texas, one-party consent is all the law requires. I scrolled back through the call. The audio was clear. Nicole's voice, relaxed and unguarded, confirming funds from the joint account, final payment on the 19th. Trent, unaware of the source. I forwarded the file to Denise Fowler with a one-line message. "Recorded call from this morning. Nicole confirms the account and the amount." "Thought you should have it," Denise replied 40 minutes later. "This is exactly what we needed. If anyone challenges your right to close that account, this recording establishes Nicole's intent and her knowledge of the fund source. Her husband has zero claim. Sending you the updated promissory note draft tonight." I set the phone down and picked up the sandpaper. The chair was coming along. The joints were tight. I worked the seat surface in slow, even strokes and didn't think about much of anything until the light in the garage went orange and then gray. At 10 that night, a text came in from Nicole. "Dad, are you coming on the 19th? Trent would really love to see you there." A party emoji at the end. I typed back, "I'll be there." 3 days before the party, Nicole opened the Chase app. I know the exact moment because she called me 40 seconds later, voice stripped of its usual confidence, the words coming in a stunned staccato. "Dad, what happened to the account?" "I closed it." "You, what?" "There was almost $90,000 in there." $87,600. "And yes, I closed it." 4 seconds of silence. Then, "But the party, the truck. I already told everyone." "That's your problem," I said. "Not mine." She showed up at the house an hour and a half later. I heard the car in the driveway and stayed in my chair on the porch. The July heat was sitting at about 98 degrees and not apologizing for it. She came around the side gate, still in her workout clothes from wherever she'd been. Leggings, sneakers, her hair pulled back. She stopped at the top of the porch steps. I had my coffee. I gestured at the other chair. She didn't sit. She made her case standing up, the way she used to argue about curfew when she was 16. The money was always going to come back eventually. The party was for family, not just Trent. I never touched the account anyway. It just sat there. Parents helped their kids. That's what parents did. The truck was something Trent had wanted for years, a real gesture, the kind of thing that mattered. I let her finish. She went on for a while. "Nicole," I said, "you never asked. You just decided." She went quiet. Then she cried. Standing there with her arms crossed against her chest, looking out at the yard, not at me. I didn't move, didn't hand her anything, didn't tell her it would be fine, because I didn't know that it would be. And I've never been much for saying things I can't back up. The thing I felt, watching her standing there, wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't anger either, not anymore. It was something closer to exhaustion. The particular kind that comes from realizing you waited too long to say a clear word, and now the clear word costs more than it should have. She left without much more being said. I watched the Silverado disappear down the street, then went inside and called Denise Fowler. Denise had the living trust documents ready when I arrived at her office on Ross Avenue 30 minutes later. We'd talked through the structure 2 days earlier. The house in Oak Cliff and the 2 duplexes in Garland would transfer into a revocable living trust with me as the sole trustee. My assets, fully under my control, in a legal structure that placed them outside the reach of any claim that might get routed through Nicole's marital estate. Trent could hire every attorney in Dallas County, he'd still hit a wall. I read every page before I signed anything. Denise waited without rushing me. That's the thing about hiring a professional rather than calling in a favor. They don't take it personally when you read the fine print. I signed where indicated. Denise witnessed it and handed me the executed copies in a manila folder. "I'll file the property transfer affidavits with the county recorder by end of week," she said. "After that, the duplexes are in the trust on record." "How long before it's bulletproof?" "It already is. The filing is just the public record." On the way out, I asked her what she expected from Trent once the party fell apart. "He'll look for leverage," she said. "Give him a week or 2 to figure out he doesn't have any." I drove home with the folder on the passenger seat. The duplexes were going into the trust. The recording was filed with Denise. The $87,600 sat in an account that was mine alone. I'd closed every door I could identify. Back in the garage, I worked on the oak chair until the light was gone. The back slat joinery had been giving me trouble. A hairline gap where the tenon met the mortise. I took a shoulder plane to it, slow passes, checking the fit after each one, until the surfaces met, flush and solid. You could press your thumb across the joint and feel nothing but a clean seam. That's how you build something that holds. My phone rang on the workbench. I looked at the screen. Trent's name, the first time he'd called me directly in over 2 years. His voice was measured, almost warm. "Raymond, I think we should talk. Man to man." Trent showed up the next morning without Nicole. I was on the porch with my second cup of coffee when the silver Audi pulled into the driveway. His car, not hers. He came up the walk in pressed khakis and a collared shirt, looking like a man who'd rehearsed the conversation on the drive over. Trent always dressed for every interaction like it was a performance review. Friendly, approachable, the kind of presentation that costs nothing and buys a lot. He took the other chair without being asked. That told me something about how he planned to run this. I didn't offer coffee. He didn't ask. "Nicole's really upset," he said. "This whole thing, the account, the party, it's put a lot of stress on her, on both of us." "I imagine it has. The thing is, Raymond, family keeps its word. You set up that account with Nicole. There was an understanding going back years. She built plans around it. That's not nothing." I let him finish. He had more. "Look, if you restore the balance before the 19th, nobody needs to stay upset about this. We move forward. Handle it as a family matter, quietly. No hard feelings." "Did you know she was going to buy you a truck with that money?" I asked. He tilted his head. "She's my wife. What she gives me is between us." "So your job was just to receive it, not to ask where it came from?" "Raymond. And when the card came back declined at the dealership, that wasn't your problem either." A short pause. He shifted in the chair. When he spoke again, the warmth had an edge under it. "I've already spoken with a lawyer. Nicole had long-term regular access to those funds. There are arguments to be made about marital property, about reasonable expectation, about the intent behind a joint account. I don't want to go that route, but I will if I have to." There it was. He'd come friendly and left the real message for the end, the way you put the bill underneath a stack of pleasantries. I stood up and held the front door open. "Talk to whoever you need to talk to," I said. Trent walked back to the Audi without another word. I watched him pull out and disappear around the corner before going inside. The coffee had gone lukewarm. I drank it anyway. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived from Craig Barnes, attorney at law, McKinney Avenue, Dallas. I read it standing at the kitchen counter. Twice through, slowly. Barnes had put together a real argument. He cited the Texas Family Code, referenced Nicole's status as a long-term authorized user, and claimed she held a reasonable expectation of shared control over the account. Sufficient, he argued, to constitute a marital asset. The letter called my closure a unilateral act violating her marital property rights. The demand, return $87,600 within 10 days or face civil action. The number was exact. The language was practiced. Trent hadn't thrown this together after I turned him away from my porch. He'd had Barnes preparing it before he came to visit. Maybe before the party was even on the calendar. I called Denise Fowler. "He cannot win this," she said, after I read her the key paragraphs. Nicole was an authorized user, not a co-owner. That distinction is written into the original account agreement, and it's dispositive under Texas law. But Raymond, Barnes knows that too. If he files anyway, purely to apply pressure, you're looking at $15,000 to $20,000 in defense costs before the case gets dismissed. That's the entire strategy. Make settling cheaper than fighting. I understand the math. Good. Don't respond to Barnes directly, not even to acknowledge receipt. I'll handle all correspondence through my office. I'll have a formal response drafted by end of week. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a while with the Barnes letter in front of me. Outside, the neighbor's sprinklers came on. The afternoon was doing what July afternoons do in Dallas. Pressing down, not asking permission, I thought about Trent, sitting in that chair on my porch, offering me the chance to make it all go away quietly. He'd probably expected me to weigh the trouble of a legal fight and take the exit he'd handed me. 66 years old, retired, living on rent checks and Social Security. On paper, that looks like someone who doesn't want a battle. But Raymond... Denise had paused before she finished. "I've been going through the full account history. Everything from the past 2 years. There's something in here you haven't seen yet. It changes your position considerably." I was in Denise's office on Ross Avenue by 10 the following morning. She had the bank statements spread across the conference table in 2 rows, printouts sorted by date, 14 months of transaction records from the joint account. Certain entries were highlighted in yellow. There were more yellow marks than I'd expected. Nicole wasn't just pulling from the account for the party, Denise said. She ran her finger along a column of small, recurring transfers. 1 per month, sometimes 2. $400 here, $600 there, $850 in 1 month, $720 in another. The destination account is the same every single time, a credit card registered to Trent Wallace. I looked at the figures. Added them up in my head without writing anything down. $11,840, Denise said. Transferred from your joint savings account directly into Trent's personal credit card, over 14 months. No authorization from you, no notification. I set the papers down on the table. She was paying his card bills with my money, I said. Every month, consistently, and since Trent was the card holder, he received the direct benefit of every transfer. The room was quiet for a moment. I thought about those 14 months. The Sunday calls from Nicole asking how the duplexes were doing, how the tenants were behaving, whether I needed help with anything around the house. She'd ask about my golf game at Stevens Park, whether I'd finished the oak chair in the garage. Easy, familiar calls, the kind that lull you into thinking nothing has shifted. All of it running alongside those regular transfers, moving quietly from my account into Trent's credit line. The truck had been one decision. A breathtaking one, but a single act. This was different. 14 separate months. 14 separate choices. And not one word. If Barnes files his lawsuit, Denise said, we meet him with a counterclaim for unauthorized use of funds. The $11,840 in undisclosed transfers, plus the $6,400 spent on party expenses without your consent. Plus attorney's fees, that's over $18,000 in documented claims we bring to the table before a judge hears one word of Barnes's opening argument. All right, there's more. She pulled a second page from the folder and slid it across to me. A credit union letterhead, a Plano address, dated April. My paralegal found this yesterday. Trent took out a personal loan in April. $18,000 from a regional credit union. Look at the supporting assets section of the application. I found the line. The language was measured. Anticipated monetary gift from immediate family member. He had borrowed $18,000 against money I hadn't given him. Money I'd never agreed to give him. Money that was never his to count on. He listed a non-existent asset on a loan application, I said. A non-existent, unguaranteed asset. One that depended entirely on your continued generosity and on your daughter's ability to access an account she didn't own outright. Denise kept her voice level and professional. It's not criminal on its face, but listing a fictional asset to secure financing is a material misrepresentation. Credit institutions take that seriously when it's formally flagged for review. I sat back in my chair. 2 days ago, Trent had sat on my porch and talked to me about family keeping its word. Looked me in the eye. Did it clean and easy, the way you do when you've had a lot of practice. He'd been carrying an $18,000 loan in his back pocket the whole time. A loan built on the quiet assumption that I'd stay passive, stay grateful to be included, and never look too carefully at where the money was actually going. Sweating like a sinner in church. That was going to be his expression when this paperwork arrived on Barnes's desk. I'd have paid good money to see it in person. As it turned out, I wouldn't have to wait long. Denise, I said, do you know the lending officer at that credit union? She clicked her pen closed and set it carefully on the table. No, she said. But I know who does. The hearing was on the 1st of August, in a courtroom on Commerce Street, downtown Dallas. I'd been in a lot of rooms with people who thought they had the advantage. Job sites, contract disputes, county permit offices. You learn to read them. Craig Barnes, Trent's attorney, walked in with the energy of a man who'd won this particular argument before. Pressed suit, Fresh notepad, the practiced ease of someone who charges $350 an hour and wants you to know it. Denise Fowler set her briefcase on the table without rushing and said good morning to the clerk. The hearing was on Barnes's motion for a preliminary injunction, an attempt to freeze my personal checking account while the broader dispute was sorted out. His argument was the same as the letter. Nicole had a reasonable expectation of shared access. My closure was improper, and I should be prevented from spending or moving the $87,600 while the matter was pending. Judge Bernadette Long had the account agreement open on her bench before Barnes had finished his second paragraph. "Counselor," she said, "where in your filing is the evidence that Mr. Castillo took on an obligation not to close this account?" Barnes straightened. "Your Honor, there was a long-standing oral understanding between Mr. Castillo and his daughter. Oral agreements in Texas regarding financial accounts exceeding $500 are not enforceable without corroborating written documentation or witness testimony." "What documentation do you have?" He had Nicole's anticipated testimony about what she believed the account meant. He had a general characterization of the family relationship. He did not have a signed agreement. He did not have a single written communication from me committing to anything. Denise handed the judge a one-page summary. No grandstanding, just the 2020 account agreement, page 3, section 7. Primary account holder, Raymond Castillo. Unilateral closure authority, primary holder. Nicole's status, authorized user, not co-owner, not joint title holder, authorized user. Judge Long read the section, looked up at Barnes. Motion denied. Barnes's jaw didn't drop. He was too practiced for that. But there was a half-second where his mouth stayed closed, a beat too long, and he glanced at his notepad instead of the judge. Trent, sitting in the gallery 2 rows back, went very still. His expression didn't change, but something behind it shifted. The particular look of a man who just realized the floor was somewhere different from where he'd been standing. That dog won't hunt, I thought. I kept my face exactly where it belonged. Micro-win. While Barnes was still gathering his papers, Denise filed our counterclaim on the spot. A formal civil action for unauthorized use of account funds. The $11,840 transferred from my joint account to Trent's personal credit card across 14 months without my authorization or knowledge. The filing was accepted and entered into the court record before we walked out of the building. Trent left the courthouse with Barnes beside him, both of them talking low. His shoulders were forward, head angled down, the posture of a man doing math that wasn't adding up the way he'd planned. I watched him from across the lobby for a moment. 4 years at my dinner table, 4 years of handshakes and holiday visits, and the best he could manage right now was a whispered conversation with a lawyer who just lost a motion in under 20 minutes. I picked up my folder and walked out into the August heat. It was 96 degrees on Commerce Street, and I didn't mind it one bit. On the drive back, Denise called from her office. "He'll push back," she said. "Barnes has to file the underlying lawsuit now, the marital property claim. Otherwise Trent loses all his leverage." "I know. There's someone I need you to contact. The credit union that issued the $18,000 loan. You mentioned a former client who works in financial services." "Daniel Reed," I said. "I built a warehouse complex for him in 2019. He's in risk management at a credit union in Plano. I discounted the final invoice by $14,000 to close the job on schedule." "Call him today," Denise said. I pulled off onto a side street near I-30 and made the call right there. Daniel Reed picked up on the third ring. I gave him my name and reminded him of the warehouse project. He remembered immediately. I told him what I needed. He was quiet for a moment. "Send me the loan document," he said. "I'll pull the file." I forwarded the paperwork to Denise that afternoon. She sent it to Reed directly, with a cover letter summarizing the situation. 2 days later, Reed called back. "It's what you described," he said. The application lists a supporting asset as anticipated monetary gift from immediate family member, estimated value $87,600. The loan officer accepted it on face value. There were risk indicators in the file that weren't followed up on. A pause. I'm escalating this for formal review. We'll be requesting documentation of the anticipated gift from Mr. Wallace. Given that the account no longer exists, that triggers an early review of the loan terms. It wasn't criminal. Trent wasn't going to get arrested over a loan application. But the $18,000 he'd borrowed, money he'd used to anchor his whole counter strategy, was about to get examined very carefully by the people he owed it to. A formal review meant requests for documentation. Documentation that didn't exist? Terms that could be called in early. That was going to occupy a significant portion of his attention going forward. I thanked Reed and hung up. He'd repaid the $14,000 discount several times over, and he hadn't even had to think about it. Meanwhile, Denise assembled the full package for Barnes. The counterclaim for $11,840. The audio recording from my phone call with Nicole, her voice, calm and unguarded, confirming the account source and Trent's ignorance of where the money came from. The executed living trust documents establishing that every piece of real property I owned was held in trust and entirely beyond the reach of any marital property argument Barnes might construct. Barnes received the package on a Thursday. He called Denise's office the following Monday. Mr. Barnes would like to discuss settlement options, his assistant said. Denise's position was stated once, clearly. Our client would engage in settlement discussions only after full withdrawal of the lawsuit and a written acknowledgement that the joint savings account had been Raymond Castillo's sole property at the time of closure. Both conditions, no substitutions. Barnes called back the same afternoon. My client isn't prepared to sign an acknowledgement. He feels that demand is unreasonable given the circumstances. The circumstances are documented, Denise said. 14 months of unauthorized transfers, a recorded conversation, and a loan application listing a non-existent asset. Our client finds the acknowledgement very reasonable. We'll need more time to consider. You have 48 hours, Denise said, and ended the call. She texted me the summary immediately. Barnes stalling. He's going back to Trent. Expect movement by end of week. That evening my phone rang. Nicole, calling from her cell, not from the house line she and Trent shared. I noticed it. Her voice was quiet. Controlled, but just barely. Dad, Trent told me today that he took out a loan in April. He said it was for home repairs. She stopped. He told the bank it was backed by an inheritance from you. I know, I said. He lied to me about what the money was for. He lied to the bank about where it was coming from, too. A long silence on the line. The oak tree outside was still in the evening heat. Dallas was doing what it does in late summer, holding the warmth past dark, not letting go. What am I supposed to do? Nicole asked. Call a lawyer, I said. Not his, yours. She was quiet for another moment. Do you know one? Denise Fowler can refer you to someone in family law. She's on Ross Avenue. Tell her I sent you. I paused. Nicole, whatever Trent says over the next few days, don't sign anything. Not a form, not an agreement, not a text message with a number in it. Nothing. Okay, she said, quietly, like someone writing it down. After she hung up, I sat at the kitchen table without turning on any lights. The house settled around me, the way old houses do in the evening. Small sounds, familiar weight. I went to bed early. The counterclaim was filed. The loan was under review. Barnes had 48 hours. I slept fine. Nicole hired a lawyer the same week. Her name was Gail Morris, a family attorney out of Plano. I'd never met her, but Denise knew her by reputation. Sharp, efficient, specializing in marital disputes. Nicole called me after her first meeting with Gail and didn't say much, just that she was moving forward. I didn't push for details. She was making the right call. That was enough. What Gail uncovered came through Denise a few days later, delivered in a 2-page summary on plain letterhead. Trent had been running a separate personal account for 2 years. A checking account at a different bank, in his name only, that Nicole had no access to or knowledge of. Into that account, every month, he'd been diverting between $800 and $1,400 from the household budget. The documented total over 24 months, $26,500. Not invested, not saved for anything joint. Spent. The account showed regular withdrawals, restaurant charges, transfers to sources Gail hadn't fully traced yet. Nicole had been funding a household. Trent had been running a private one alongside it. I read Denise's summary at the kitchen table twice through, slowly. Outside the window, the August heat was at it again. 99 degrees by noon, pressing down like it owned the place. So he was using both of them, I said. Simultaneously, Denise said. Nicole's income, your account through Nicole, and his own salary, redirected. The man was managing 4 cash flows, and nobody knew about 3 of them. I thought about Trent at that rehearsal dinner years ago, giving an 8-minute toast that mentioned himself 14 times. I'd filed that away as vanity. Turned out it was a preview. Barnes withdrew the lawsuit against me the following week. The document arrived by email, a formal withdrawal of the marital property claim, signed by Barnes, with the written acknowledgement attached. The joint savings account had been the sole property of Raymond Castillo at the time of closure, and Trent Wallace made no claim to it. Both conditions exactly as Denise had demanded. I read it twice, set it down beside the Barnes letter from a month ago, and compared the two. Same letterhead, very different tone. One had been a demand backed by confidence. The other was a retreat, backed by nothing. Between those 2 documents was about 6 weeks of my time, Denise's billing rate, Daniel Reed's phone call, and a bank account agreement I'd kept in a folder since 2020. Trent had one more move. Through Barnes, he filed a marital property division request in the divorce proceedings, and in the asset list, he included, I have to give him credit for the attempt, the 2 duplexes in Garland, listed as family residential investment resources with historical spousal benefit. The argument was that Nicole had benefited from income generated by those properties during the marriage. Therefore, they should be considered in the division. Denise called me at 10 in the morning to tell me. I could hear something in her voice that she was working to keep neutral. He listed your duplexes, she said. I know. I'm assuming the trust covers this. Completely. The properties transferred into your revocable living trust before any divorce filing. They are legally your assets, held in trust with no record of transfer to Nicole at any point. There is no marital claim that reaches them. Barnes knows this. He filed it anyway, probably hoping we'd negotiate. I tell you what, I thought. He really did try everything. What do we do? I asked. I filed a response this afternoon. 1 paragraph. The duplexes are trust property. End of discussion. She paused. Raymond. He's out of moves. She filed the response that afternoon. Barnes had nothing to counter with. The trust document was clear, filed with the county, dated weeks before any divorce paperwork existed. That evening Denise called again. There's one more detail, she said. Before we finalize the settlement on the counterclaim. Something you need to know. The detail was this. The $6,400 that Nicole had pulled from the joint account for the party, the catering deposit, the venue booking, the decor, had not stayed in Nicole's hands. Denise had traced the payments. Every vendor check had been written from a joint account that Nicole and Trent shared, which meant Trent had been the co-signatory on every transaction. The money had moved through his name as much as hers, which made him a direct financial beneficiary of funds taken from my account without authorization. He signed off on all of it, I asked. His name is on the account. Under Texas law, both spouses are jointly liable for transactions from a shared account. He can't claim he didn't know. He's a named account holder. That brought Trent's documented exposure in my counterclaim to the full $11,840 in monthly transfers, plus his share of the $6,400. Denise filed the amended counterclaim with the new figures the following morning. Barnes called that afternoon. My client would like to discuss a full settlement, his assistant said. We met in Denise's office on Ross Avenue. Barnes and a man I hadn't seen before, who turned out to be Trent's personal accountant, brought in to verify numbers. Trent himself did not attend. That told me something. A man who'd sat on my porch and talked to me about family keeping its word had decided not to be in the room when the bill came due. Barnes presented a settlement offer. Trent would repay $8,000 of the counterclaim amount in a lump sum and consider the matter closed. He framed it as a reasonable compromise given the complexity of the situation. I looked at the number on the paper, $8,000 on an $11,840 claim. Trent wasn't in the room, and he was still trying to negotiate a discount. Denise set the counterclaim documents on the table. $11,840, she said. Full amount. Payable in 60 days, structured in 2 equal installments. Plus a written statement acknowledging that the joint savings account was Raymond Castillo's sole property. We already have that acknowledgement from the withdrawal of the original lawsuit, but we want it restated in the settlement agreement. Barnes looked at his notepad. The accountant looked at his phone. My client will accept those terms, Barnes said. The settlement was signed in Denise's office. Barnes signed for Trent. I signed for myself. Denise notarized. The whole thing took 11 minutes. Roughly the same amount of time it had taken Kevin at the Chase Bank to transfer $87,600 into my personal account back on that July morning. On the way out, Denise said, "You handled this well." "I closed a bank account," I said. "The rest took care of itself." Nicole and Trent filed for divorce that September. I didn't celebrate it. Some things are correct without being good, and that was one of them. Nicole had seen clearly what she needed to see. What she did with it was hers to decide. I called her on a Sunday, the way I'd started doing after the settlement. She answered on the second ring. We talked about nothing specific. How the fall was coming in, whether I'd finished the oak chair, whether she'd found a place of her own in Plano yet. She had. Small apartment, she said, but quiet. I told her quiet wasn't bad. I had. Neighbor 2 streets over bought it for $220 and said it was the best piece of furniture in his house. The duplexes in Garland kept producing $3,200 a month. The $87,600 sat in my personal account, untouched. The updated will was on file with Denise's office. Nicole inherits everything, with a clause ensuring that no former spouse or their legal representative can make any claim against the estate. I went back to the garage, started a new project, a small bookshelf, oak and walnut, fitted joints, no hardware, patient work. Outside, the September air was finally doing something reasonable for once. Dallas in the fall. The heat backs off just enough that a man can sit on his porch in the evening and not resent it. I poured a cup of coffee, took the other chair, and looked at the fence. Don't mess with Texas, and don't mess with the man who read his bank contract all the way to page 3, section 7. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.